Jake Morrison wiped the sweat from his forehead as he crawled under the broken food synthesizer in the ship's main kitchen. The machine had been making strange noises for 3 days, and now it refused to work at all. He pulled out his tools and started checking the power connections. Jake was good at fixing things. He had been working as a maintenance technician on the UHS Endeavour for 2 years, and he knew every pipe and wire on the ship. The Endeavour was not just any ship. It was the, most important diplomatic vessel in human space. Today, it would host the biggest peace meeting in galaxy history. The Terran Federation was trying to avoid a war with the Vorthak Empire. The alien warriors had already taken over dozens of worlds, and now they wanted human territory too. If the talks failed today, there would be fighting across half the galaxy. Jake did not think much about politics. He just wanted to fix the food machine before lunchtime. The diplomatic staff would be angry if their fancy meal was ruined. He found a burned wire and started replacing it when alarms began ringing through the ship. Commander Lisa Bennett's voice came over the speakers. "All crew to stations. The Vorthak delegation has arrived early. I repeat, the Vorthak ships are here now." Jake cursed under his breath. The aliens were supposed to come in 3 hours. He needed more time to fix the synthesizer. He kept working while he heard boots running in the corridors outside. Everyone was rushing to get ready for the most important meeting of their lives. Captain Amy Rodriguez appeared in the kitchen doorway. She looked stressed, and her uniform was wrinkled. "Jake, how long until that machine works?" "Maybe 20 minutes if I hurry," Jake said without looking up from his work. "We don't have 20 minutes. The Vorthak shuttle just docked, and we have a big problem." Amy sat down on a chair and put her head in her hands. "The main computer crashed when you started working on that thing. Half our translation systems are down, and nobody can access the cultural protocols." Jake stopped working and looked at her. "What does that mean?" "It means we don't know how to greet them properly. The Vorthak takes ceremony very seriously. If we insult them by accident, they might leave and declare war." Amy stood up and paced around the small kitchen. "Lisa is trying to fix the computer, but it could take hours. The elf delegation from Silvermoon is having some crisis too, and all our real diplomats are busy with that mess. Can't you just say hello and shake hands?" Jake asked. Amy laughed, but it was not a happy sound. "Jake, these are 8-foot-tall alien warriors who could break a human in half. They have rules for everything. The wrong word or gesture could start a war that kills billions of people." Jake went back to fixing the wire. He had met aliens before, but not the scary kind. When he was a kid, his family lived on a frontier colony called New Kansas. There were some Vorthak refugees there who had fled from their home world during a civil war. Jake used to play with the Vorthak children and learn some of their language. Their parents taught him about their customs and stories. But that was different. These refugees were peaceful farmers, not warriors. "Wait," Amy said suddenly. "You grew up on New Kansas, right? Didn't you know some Vorthak there?" "A few families, yeah, but they were just regular people, not soldiers or diplomats." Amy grabbed his shoulder. "Jake, I need you to do something crazy. I need you to go greet the Vorthak delegation and keep them happy until we can get this mess sorted out." Jake nearly dropped his tools. "You want me to what? I'm just a maintenance guy. I fix things. You're the only person on this ship who speaks any Vorthak at all. Please, Jake. I know it sounds insane, but we're out of options." Jake looked at the broken synthesizer, then at Amy's desperate face. "What am I supposed to say to them?" "I don't know. Just be polite and try not to start a war." 10 minutes later, Jake found himself standing in the main docking bay wearing his cleanest work uniform. His hands were still dirty from the repair work, and he felt completely out of place. The Vorthak shuttle was huge and black with strange symbols painted on its side. Steam hissed as the doors opened, and the aliens walked out. Jake had forgotten how big they were. The leader was a female warrior with dark blue skin and silver markings on her face. She wore armor that looked like it was made from some kind of metal scales and carried weapons that could probably blow holes in the ship's hull. Behind her came 6 more warriors, all just as intimidating. The alien leader looked around the docking bay with yellow eyes that seemed to see everything. When she spotted Jake standing alone, she tilted her head in confusion. She said something in the Vorthak language that Jake barely understood. Jake took a deep breath and tried to remember the words his old friends had taught him. He bowed the way he had seen the refugee children do and spoke slowly in Vorthak. "Welcome, honored warriors. This humble servant greets you in the name of peace." The alien leader's eyes went wide with surprise. She looked at Jake more carefully, then spoke again in Vorthak. "You know the old words human. Who taught you our language?" "Friends from the outer colonies," Jake replied, still speaking Vorthak. "They said your people value courage and honor above all things." The warrior smiled, and it was not frightening at all. "Indeed we do, small builder. I am Kethara of the Third Fleet. You speak our tongue with the accent of the farming clans. This is unexpected." Jake felt some of his fear go away. Kethara reminded him of Mrs. Vexani, who used to give him cookies and tell him stories about warrior heroes. "I learned from good teachers. Please will you follow me to the meeting room? Our leaders are eager to speak with you." "Lead the way." "Young human, you have already honored us more than your diplomatic messages suggested." As they walked through the ship's corridors, Jake pointed out different areas and explained what they were used for. Kethara asked questions about human technology and seemed genuinely interested in his answers. She was nothing like the terrifying monster he had expected. Behind a corner, Zarathel, the elf diplomat, watched this strange scene with growing fascination. She had been dealing with her own people's problems when the alarm sounded. Now she saw a human maintenance worker chatting casually with one of the most feared warriors in the galaxy. The elf woman had studied diplomacy for over 100 years, but she had never seen anything like this. There was something special about this human that everyone else had missed. The formal dinner was supposed to be perfect. Commander Lisa Bennett had spent weeks planning every detail. The main dining hall was decorated with symbols from all three species, and the menu included foods that everyone could eat safely. Long tables were arranged in a triangle so that humans, elves, and Vorthaks could see each other as equals. Jake stood in the kitchen putting the final touches on the food synthesizer he had repaired. The machine was working perfectly now, but he felt nervous about the dinner. Captain Amy had told him he needed to attend as the cultural liaison until the real diplomats finished dealing with their computer problems. Jake did not know what a cultural liaison was supposed to do. Dr. Susan Clark found him checking the synthesizer for the third time. She was the ship's expert on alien biology and had spent years studying different species. "You did good work with the Vorthak delegation this afternoon, Jake. Kethara seems to like you." "She's not as scary as I thought she would be," Jake said. "She asked a lot of questions about how we grow food and repair our ships. She seemed really interested in normal, everyday stuff." Susan smiled. "That's because you treated her like a person instead of a dangerous alien. Most humans are too afraid to have real conversations with Vorthaks." The dinner bell rang and Jake followed Susan to the dining hall. The room was full of important people in fancy uniforms. Jake felt very out of place in his simple work clothes. Commander Lisa was talking to a group of human officials, while Zarathel stood with several other elves who had long silver hair and wore robes covered in star patterns. The Vorthak delegation entered last. Kethara had changed into ceremonial, armor that gleamed like polished metal. The other warriors stayed near the walls, but she walked directly to Jake. "Greetings again, young builder. I hope you will sit with us tonight." Before Jake could answer, Lisa stepped forward with a nervous smile. "Welcome, honored Kethara. Please allow me to show you to the head table where you can sit with our senior staff." Kethara looked at Lisa, then back at Jake. "I would prefer to sit with the one who knows our ways. This human showed me proper respect when others did not." Lisa's face went red, but she nodded quickly. "Of course, Jake will join you at the head table." The seating arrangement got confused when the elf delegation arrived at the head table. Zarathel was supposed to sit between the human and Vorthak leaders, but somehow Jake ended up between her and Kethara instead. Lisa looked like she wanted to fix the mistake, but everyone was already sitting down and the food was being served. Jake found himself looking at a plate of things he could not identify. There were green vegetables from the elf world's yellow fruits that the Vorthaks liked, and something that was supposed to be earth chicken but did not look right. He picked at his food while the important people around him made polite conversation. About trade agreements and territorial boundaries, Zarathel turned to him with curious green eyes. "You are not what I expected from human diplomatic staff. Most of your people who deal with other species are much more formal." "I'm not really diplomatic staff," Jake said. "I just fix things when they break. I'm only here because of a computer." "Problem?" Interesting. And yet you managed to welcome our Vorthak friends better than trained ambassadors might have. Zarathel spoke in a musical voice that reminded Jake of wind chimes. Tell me what you know about their culture. Jake shrugged. Not much, really. I had some Vorthak neighbors when I was a kid. They taught me that family and honor are the most important things to them. They love stories about brave heroes, and they think physical work is just as valuable as mental work. Cathara was listening to their conversation. The young human speaks truth. Your diplomatic messages spoke only of trade and territory, but this one understands what matters to our hearts. What matters to your hearts? Zarathel asked. Cathara put down her eating utensil and spoke carefully. We are not the monsters your people believe us to be. Yes, we are warriors, but we fight to protect what we love, our children, our elders, our way of life. When we expand to new worlds, it is because our old worlds can no longer support our growing population. Jake nodded. The Vorthak families I knew always talked about their homeworld with sadness. They said the soil was getting tired and the mines were running empty. Exactly, Cathara said. We do not conquest for glory. We conquest for survival. Zarathel leaned forward with interest. This is not what our intelligence reports suggested. Our analysts believed you were building an empire for its own sake. Your analysts never asked what we truly needed, Cathara replied. They only looked at our military movements and assumed the worst. Dr. Susan Clark, who was sitting nearby, had been listening to this conversation. She joined in. What do your people need most right now? Cathara thought for a moment. Rich soil for farming, clean water sources, certain minerals that our technology requires. Most importantly, safe places where our young can grow up without fear. Jake looked between the alien warrior and the elf diplomat. That doesn't sound like conquest. That sounds like immigration. Immigration. Zarathel repeated the word slowly. We elves have dealt with population movements for thousands of years. When species need new homes, we help them find suitable worlds that are not already occupied. You would do this for us? Cathara asked with surprise in her voice. We might if we understood your true needs instead of only seeing your warships. Jake had an idea. What if the three species worked together instead of fighting? Humans are good at building things quickly. Elves know how to manage resources wisely. Vorthaks are strong and could protect everyone from real threats. Both women stared at him. Then Zarathel began to laugh. It was a beautiful sound, like silver bells. From the mouths of maintenance workers come the wisest words. You see solutions where diplomats see only problems. Cathara nodded slowly. This human thinks like a warrior but fights like a builder. He seeks victory through creation, not destruction. The conversation was interrupted when a young Vorthak officer approached the table. He whispered something in Cathara's ear that made her face go pale. She stood up quickly and spoke in rapid Vorthak to her advisors. Jake caught enough words to understand that something was wrong. A ship was approaching, and someone was sick or injured. Cathara looked torn between duty and worry. What is happening? Zarathel asked. Cathara hesitated, then spoke quietly. My daughter's ship approaches. She was wounded in our last campaign and suffers from what you would call battle trauma. She should be recovering at home, but she insisted on coming to ensure my safety. Battle trauma, Susan said. We have treatments for that condition. Both human medicine and elf healing techniques have had success helping soldiers recover from psychological wounds. You would help her, Cathara asked. Of course, Jake said without thinking. That's what friends do. The word friends hung in the air between them. Cathara looked at Jake with something that might have been tears in her yellow eyes. You would call us friends human. Why not? We're all just people trying to take care of our families. Across the table, an ancient alien woman with silver skin and star-like markings watched this exchange with knowing eyes. Nixandra was an oracle from a neutral species, and she had seen many possible futures in her visions. Now she spoke for the first time that evening. The paths of war and peace diverge tonight. I see victory coming not from the strong, but from the one who builds bridges with the same hands that repair broken things. The alarm started ringing just as dessert was being served. Jake dropped his spoon as the ship's lights shifted to the red warning pattern. Commander Lisa's voice crackled over the communication system with tension in every word. All hands to battle stations. Unknown. Vorthek warship approaching at high speed. This is not a drill. The dining hall erupted into chaos. Human officers ran for the exits while the elf delegation moved toward their own ships. Only the Vorthaks remained calm, though Jake could see worry in their yellow eyes. Cathara stood and spoke rapidly to her warriors in their native language. Captain Amy burst into the dining hall with her weapon drawn. Cathara, is this an attack? Did you bring more ships to threaten us? No, Cathara said firmly. This ship comes without my orders. I do not know why it approaches. Jake listened carefully to the Vorthak conversations around him. His language skills were basic, but he caught important words. Daughter, sick, afraid, medical help. The pieces started fitting together in his mind. Lisa's voice came over the speakers again. Vorthak vessel, you are entering neutral space without authorization. State your intentions immediately, or we will consider you hostile. The response came in heavily accented English. This is War Singer Vexara of the clan Kethara. I come seeking my mother who treaties with soft skins. I am wounded and need guidance. Kethara closed her eyes and spoke a word in Vorthak that Jake did not recognize, but the tone was pure pain. My daughter, she whispered in English. She was not supposed to follow me here. Jake stepped closer to Kethara, even though several human soldiers were pointing weapons in her direction. She's hurt, isn't she? That's why she came. Kethara looked at him with surprise. You understood our words. Some of them. She's scared and looking for her mother, just like any kid would be. Amy was listening to reports from the bridge through her earpiece. The Vorthak ship has weapons powered up. Our fleet is moving to intercept. This could turn into a shooting war in minutes. Wait, Jake said loudly. Everyone in the room turned to look at him. This isn't an attack. It's a family emergency. Jake. Stay out of this, Amy warned. You don't understand military situations. But I understand people. Jake looked around the room at all the frightened and angry faces. Kethara, your daughter is afraid. She doesn't trust us enough to come aboard without weapons ready. She thinks we might hurt you. Kethara nodded slowly. Vexara has seen too. Much war. She trusts no one outside our clan. When she learned I was coming to make peace with former enemies, she insisted on following to protect me. Zarathel had been listening carefully. If this young warrior is suffering from battle trauma, she may not be thinking clearly. Wounded soldiers often make dangerous decisions. Dr. Susan Clark spoke up from where she had been monitoring the situation. I'm reading elevated stress signals from the approaching ship. Multiple life forms in distress. This isn't an attack formation, it's a medical emergency. Jake made a decision that could have gotten him arrested or killed. He walked to the communication panel and pressed the button before anyone could stop him. Vexara, this is Jake Morrison speaking from the human ship. Your mother is safe here. She has been treated with honor and respect. We have doctors who can help with your injuries if, you will let us. The response was immediate and angry. Human deceiver, I will not be fooled by soft words. Release my mother or face the fire of Vorthak justice. Jake looked at Kethara, who was watching him with an unreadable expression. Please tell her I'm not her enemy. Tell her about the farming families from New Kansas who taught me your language. Tell her I know the story of the warrior who saved his village by building bridges instead of walls. Kethara's eyes went wide. You know the tale of bridge builder Korth? That is an ancient story that few humans have heard. Mrs. Vexani told it to me when I was 8 years old. She said it was about finding strength in making connections instead of breaking them. Kethara took the communication device from Jake's hands. She spoke in rapid Vorthak for several minutes. Jake caught words for safety, honor, trust, and healing. When she finished, there was silence from the approaching ship. Finally, Vexara's voice came back, but quieter now. Mother, you speak truth. This human knows our old ways. He knows more than that, daughter. He sees us as people, not monsters. Come aboard and let his healer friends help your wounds. I give you my word, you will be safe. The tension in the room shifted as people realized the immediate threat was passing. Amy lowered her weapon and Lisa's voice came over the speakers, again with less panic. Vorthak vessel, you are cleared for docking. Medical teams report to Bay 3. Zarathel moved to stand beside Jake. That was either very brave or very foolish. How did you know that story would matter to her? I didn't know for sure. But when I was a kid and got scared, Mrs. Vexani would tell me stories to help me feel better. I figured it might work for her daughter, too. Dr. Susan was already preparing to leave for the medical bay. Jake, you should come with me. If this young Vorthak has trust issues, you might be able to help her accept treatment. I don't know anything about medicine. But you know about talking to frightened Vorthaks. That might be more important right now. As they headed toward the docking bay, Jake noticed that the entire atmosphere on the ship had changed. Instead of preparing for battle, the crew was preparing to help. Human medical teams were gathering supplies while elf healers offered their services. Cathara walked beside Jake and spoke quietly. You have done something remarkable tonight, human. You prevented a war before it could begin. My daughter would have died fighting to protect me, and many of your people would have died with her. I just did what felt right. That is exactly why it worked. You followed your heart instead of military protocol. They reached the docking bay as Vexara's ship came through the force field. It was smaller than the diplomatic vessel, but covered in weapons and armor. As the doors opened, Jake saw a young Vorthak woman who looked like a smaller version of her mother. But where Cathara carried herself with confident strength, Vexara moved like someone who expected attack from any direction. She saw Jake standing next to her mother, and her hand moved toward her weapon. Cathara spoke sharply in Vorthak, and Vexara stopped but did not relax. Jake stepped forward slowly with his hands visible and empty. He spoke in careful Vorthak. Welcome, warrior Vexara. I am Jake the Bridge Builder. Your mother has honored us with her presence and her wisdom. Will you allow our healers to ease your pain? Vexara stared at him for a long moment. Then she replied in broken English. You speak old words, human, but words are easy. Actions show truth. Then let my actions speak. Dr. Susan will examine your injuries. I will stay with you to translate and make sure you feel safe. When you are healed, you can decide if humans are worthy of your trust. Behind them, Zarathel watched this interaction with growing amazement. She had seen diplomats work for months to build the kind of trust that Jake was creating in minutes. There was something special about this human maintenance worker that everyone had overlooked until now. 2 hours later, they were all back in the dining hall, but everything had changed. Vexara sat between her mother and Dr. Susan with healing patches on her arms, where the worst wounds had been. The young Vorthak warrior looked tired, but no longer, ready to fight everyone in the room. Jake had spent the time in the medical bay talking to Vexara, while Susan and the elf healers worked on her injuries. He learned that she had been fighting in border wars for 3 years, and had seen too many friends die. She did not trust anyone outside her own clan, and the idea of making peace with humans seemed impossible to her. But when Jake told her about the Vorthak families on New Kansas, who had built farms instead of fortresses, she began to listen. When he described children from 3 different species playing together in the colony schools. Her yellow eyes showed something that might have been hope. Now Commander Lisa was trying to restart the formal negotiations, but Jake could see the same. Old problems coming back. The humans wanted territorial agreements. The elves wanted environmental protections. The Vorthaks wanted resource guarantees. Everyone was talking past each other using diplomatic language that said nothing important. Captain Amy sat down next to Jake and whispered, "The computer systems are fixed now. We can call in the real diplomatic team if you want to step back." Jake looked around the table at all the serious faces making serious speeches about serious problems. "Can I try something first, just for a few minutes?" Amy shrugged. "At this point, why not? You've already prevented 1 war tonight." Jake stood up and cleared his throat. The important people stopped talking and looked at him with varying degrees of curiosity and annoyance. "I know I'm just a maintenance guy and I don't understand politics, but I have a question for everyone." Lisa frowned. "Jake, we're in the middle of complex negotiations." "I know. But maybe that's the problem. We're making this too complex." Jake pulled out a napkin and a pen from his pocket. "Can I ask what each of your people actually need to be happy and safe?" Cathara spoke first. "We need worlds where our children can grow up healthy. Rich soil for farming. Clean water sources. minerals for our technology. Most importantly, we need security from those who would destroy what we build. Jake wrote these things down on the napkin. Okay, what about elves? Zarathel considered carefully. We need stable ecosystems that can support long-term habitation, sustainable resource extraction that does not damage planetary environments, trade routes that connect our scattered worlds, protection for our cultural sites and natural reserves. Jake added these to his list. And humans, Lisa answered. Expansion space for our growing population, access to trade markets, defense partnerships against hostile forces, raw materials for our industrial base. Jake looked at his napkin covered in scribbled notes. This is weird. You all need basically the same things, but you're trying to compete for them instead of working together. It's not that simple, Lisa said. There are limited resources and territorial boundaries to consider. But what if there aren't? Jake turned to Cathara. You said your people need certain minerals. What kind? Trilithium crystals for our power systems, quantum metals for our ship hulls, biological compounds for our medical treatments. Jake looked at Zarathel. Do elf worlds have these things? In abundance. We use different technologies that do not require such materials. We have often wondered what to do with the excess. And in exchange, Jake asked. Zarathel smiled. We could use protection for our trade convoys. Pirates have been attacking our merchant ships for years. We are not a military people. Vorthax are definitely military people, Jake said. You could protect elf trade routes in exchange for the minerals you need. Cathara nodded slowly. This is possible. But what about human expansion? Jake drew lines on his napkin connecting different items. Humans are good at building things. Fast. You could help elves and Vorthax develop new worlds quickly. In exchange, you get access to both their territories for expansion and their resources for industry. Dr. Susan had been listening with growing excitement. Jake, you just outlined a three-way partnership that benefits everyone. Why didn't our diplomatic teams think of this? Because diplomats think about borders and territories, Zarathel said. This human thinks about people and needs. Vexara spoke for the first time since the medical treatment. Her English was improving. This plan sounds good, but how do we trust each other? Vorthax have been enemies with humans for years. Jake looked at the young warrior. The same way you learned to trust Dr. Susan. You let her help you even though she was a stranger. Trust starts with small acts of kindness. Nixandra. The ancient oracle had been silent throughout the evening, but now she spoke in her musical voice. I have seen many possible futures in my visions. Most showed war and destruction spreading across the galaxy. But tonight I see a new path opening. 3 species learning to build instead of destroy. Lisa was studying Jake's napkin with amazement. This is actually workable. More than workable, it's brilliant. Why are you a maintenance technician instead of a diplomat? Because I like fixing things, Jake said. And this seemed like something that needed fixing. Amy laughed. Jake, you just restructured galactic politics with a napkin and a pen. Not just me. Everyone contributed ideas. I just wrote them down in a way that made sense. Cathara stood and raised her drinking cup. I propose a toast to Jake the bridge builder. Tonight he has shown us that the strongest weapon is not force, but understanding. Zarathel raised her cup as well. To new alliances forged not in desperation, but in hope. Even Vexara managed a small smile as she lifted her cup. To humans, who know old stories and keep their promises. As they drank, Jake felt a warmth that had nothing to do with the ceremonial wine. Around the table, former enemies were becoming friends. Plans were being made for cooperative colonies and shared defense. Fleets. Trade agreements were being sketched out that would benefit all 3 species. Dr. Susan was already talking to Vorthak healers about combining medical knowledge. Human engineers were discussing ship design improvements with elf environmental specialists. Young Vexara was shyly asking about the possibility of visiting New Kansas to see the peaceful Vorthak farmers Jake had described. Lisa pulled Jake aside as the evening wound down. I'm going to recommend you for the cultural integration department. We need people who can think outside traditional diplomatic frameworks. Thanks, but I'm happy fixing machines. They're less complicated than politics. Are you sure? You could write your own ticket after tonight. Jake looked around the room at people from 3 different species working together on plans for a better future. I am sure. But maybe next time your food synthesizer breaks down, you'll remember that the person who fixes it might have good ideas about other things too. As Jake headed back to his quarters, he passed by the main kitchen where he had started his day. The food synthesizer was humming quietly, making late-night snacks for the mixed crews who would be working through the night planning their new alliance. Sometimes the most important repairs were not to machines, but to relationships between people who had forgotten they could be friends. 3 months later, Jake was back under a food synthesizer, but this time he was not alone. Vexara handed him tools while asking questions about human engineering techniques. The young Vorthak had decided to stay on the Endeavor to learn about peaceful technology instead of weapons of war. "Why do humans make their machines so complicated?" she asked in much improved English. Jake laughed. "We like to tinker with things until they're perfect. Sometimes we make them too perfect, and then they break in weird ways. Vorthak machines are simple. If broken, we fix or replace. No thinking required. But thinking is the fun part. Watch this." Jake showed her how to adjust the synthesizer's flavor matrix to create new combinations of foods. Now you can make the Vorthak spice bread that tastes like elf honey cake. Vexara tried the new combination, and her yellow eyes went wide. "This is good. Mother will want to taste this." The dining hall had changed, too. Instead of formal diplomatic meals, there were regular dinners where crew members from all 3 species ate together. Humans learned to enjoy Vorthak battle songs, while elves taught everyone meditation techniques that helped with stress. The cultural exchange program that had started with Jake's napkin notes was now official policy throughout the new alliance. Doctor. Susan found them in the kitchen and handed Jake a data pad. "The medical cooperation project just got approved. We're setting up joint research stations to combine human technology with elf healing arts and Vorthak survival knowledge." "That's great," Jake said. "How's the colony planning going?" "Better than anyone expected. The first mixed settlement will be ready in 6 months. Humans will build the infrastructure while elves design sustainable systems and Vorthaks provide security. Families from all 3 species have already volunteered." Vexara looked up from the machine she was examining. "My cousin wants to join. She says farming sounds more interesting than fighting." Jake smiled. Mrs. Vexani would be proud to hear that. She always said growing things was better than destroying them. Captain Amy appeared in the doorway, looking official. "Jake, you have visitors. Commander Lisa wants to see you in the main conference room." Jake wiped his hands clean and followed Amy through corridors that had once felt tense with potential conflict. Now the walls displayed art from all 3 cultures, and the air hummed with the sounds of cooperation instead of preparation for war. The conference room was full of important people again, but the atmosphere was completely different. Lisa sat at the head of the table with Kethara and Zarathel on either side. Behind them were screens showing construction projects on a dozen different worlds. "Jake," Lisa said with a smile, "I want you to meet Admiral Sarah Mitchell from Starfleet. Command. She's here to discuss the expansion of the Cultural Integration Program." Admiral Mitchell was an older woman with gray hair and kind eyes. "Mr. Morrison, I've read all the reports about what happened here. What you accomplished in one evening took our best diplomats years to even attempt." "I just got lucky," Jake said. "And I had good teachers when I was a kid." "Luck had nothing to do with it. You saw solutions where everyone else saw problems. You treated aliens as people instead of threats. That's a rare gift." Kethara spoke up. "Jake has become like family to my clan. Vexara writes to me about her studies and says she wants to become an engineer instead of a warrior. This human changed my daughter's entire life path. And he's changed mine as well," Zarathel added. "I've learned more about effective diplomacy from watching him work than from all my formal training. We're implementing his methods in our academy." Admiral Mitchell leaned forward. "Jake, we want to offer you a position as Director of Cultural Relations for the new alliance. It would mean traveling to different worlds, helping other species learn to work together the way you did here." Jake thought about it for a moment. "That sounds like a really important job, but I'm not sure I'm qualified." "You're the most qualified person in the galaxy," Lisa said. "You've already proven that." "Thanks, but I think I'll stick with maintenance. Work. Every ship needs someone to fix the machines when they break down." Amy laughed. Jake, you're the only person I know who would turn down running the most important diplomatic program in known space so you can keep crawling under food synthesizers. Someone has to do it. Besides, I like fixing things. And I've learned that broken relationships are just as important to repair as broken machines. Admiral Mitchell smiled. I can't say I'm not disappointed, but I respect your choice. However, I do have another request. Would you be willing to train other technicians and engineers to use your approach? We need people in every fleet who can build bridges the way you do. I could do that. Teaching people to see past their differences sounds like good work. Nixandra, who had been quietly observing, spoke in her ancient voice. The prophecies spoke of a bridge builder who would change the galaxy not through conquest, but through connection. I believe those prophecies have been fulfilled. As the meeting ended, Jake found himself walking through the ship's corridors with Cathara and Zarathel. The three of them had become unlikely friends over the past months. Do you ever regret not taking the diplomatic position? Zarathel asked. Not really. I figure there are lots of smart people who can run programs and give speeches, but there aren't many who know how to fix a food synthesizer at 3 in the morning when the night shift is hungry. Cathara laughed. Spoken like a true warrior. You fight the battles that need fighting even when no one notices. They reached the main dining hall where the evening meal was being served. The room was full of mixed crews talking and laughing together. Human children played games with young elves while Vorthak adults shared stories with anyone who would listen. At one table, Dr. Susan was teaching Vorthak medics about human biology. At another, human engineers were learning about elf sustainable technology. Near the windows, a group of mixed-species families were planning their move to the new colony worlds. Look at what you created, Zarathel said to Jake. A year ago, these 3 species were preparing for war. Now they're planning futures together. I didn't create this. Everyone did. I just helped them see that they wanted the same things. As they sat down to eat, Jake noticed Vexara at a nearby table showing her mechanical drawings to a group of human engineering students. She was laughing at something one of them had said, and for a moment, she looked like any young person excited about learning new things instead of a battle-scarred warrior. The ship's communication system chimed with an announcement from the bridge. Attention all crew. We have received confirmation that the first joint colony has successfully established sustainable operations. The Harmony settlement is now home to 300 families from all Alliance species. A cheer went up from the dining hall. People raised their cups in toasts and congratulated each other on the success. Jake felt a warm satisfaction that had nothing to do with recognition or reward. Later that night, as he made his final rounds checking the ship's systems, Jake found a message waiting for him from Mrs. Vexani on New Kansas. The old Vorthak woman had heard about the Alliance and wanted to thank him for remembering the lessons she had taught him as a child. Young Jake, the message said in careful English. You have become the bridge builder from our old stories. You have shown that the strongest foundations are built not from stone but from understanding between different peoples. Your parents would be proud. Jake saved the message and headed to his quarters. Tomorrow there would be more machines to fix and more people to help understand each other. The work was never finished, but that was okay. The best kinds of work never really ended. As he passed through the corridors, he could hear the quiet sounds of a ship at peace. Soft conversations in 3 different languages, the hum of systems working properly, the gentle vibration of engines, carrying them toward new worlds and new possibilities. Sometimes the most important victories were the quiet ones that happened one conversation at a time around dinner tables, where former enemies learned to become friends. And sometimes the greatest heroes were the ones who fixed the small problems so that other people could solve the big ones. Jake Morrison was content to be exactly what he had always been. A person who fixed things when they broke down and helped others see that most problems had solutions if you looked at them the right way.